This is my presentation about an experiment that we did together. Um, Myself and the company Niche Tech that I worked. So it's a small experiment that we did. Very interesting one. We call that Nuptial experiment not because anything else, but because the template that we're using is called Nuptial. Someone can ask, maybe I'm trying to marry with SXA. Yes, I'm trying to understand SXA as much as I can. So I maybe can adopt as a tool to use everywhere. Okay, so a little bit about me. I will go fast about that. Everybody in Brazil ended up knowing about me one day out the water. So Rodrigo Peplau, working with Sitecore since 2010, three-time awarded MVP. Probably working with Niche Tech and probably member of Team Go Horse in the hackathon. Okay, so a quick agenda here of my presentation, guys. Let me know in the chat window. I have my eyes on there. If I need to stop, if I need to go slower or anything else, or if you have any question, let me know. Okay. Right. So here's a quick agenda. I will talk about the non-functional requirements of the experiment. Talk about the 3 milestones that we divided the experiment and the outputs of these experiments. All right, so a quick introduction. The experiment consists in one of the development tests that we had in-house in Niche Tech. And we decided to execute that and put in practice that development test with SXA. The test was originally written to be a .NET implementation, but it was assuming that you can use a CMS as well. It was using a Bootstrap template, a free Bootstrap template called Nuptial. That's why the experiment has the name. And the scope is very small. It's limited to 2 pages and 4 dynamic components. Okay, you see there's 2 pages only. Right, and here goes the non-functional requirements. So the implementation is based in a Bootstrap template that we have pre-done, so it's there to be used. Okay, the implementation can be done with native .NET MVC or any .NET-based CMS. Of course, the second one is our pick. We'll be using .NET 4.6.2 or .NET Core, SQL Server. So those are the non-functional requirements that we had to obey because we need to make the test, okay? The test needs to be executed with these non-functional requirements. And how that applies to SXA. So using the existing HTML template, that's the biggest problem that we had in this experiment. So the prefactor Bootstrap template is the challenge because the HTML is there, okay? So we should respect CSS, JavaScript, markups, and everything. So how do we do that? If you look at the normal implementation of SXA using Creative Exchange and everything, you see something like this, which if you go and interpret this graphic, you see that the natural process is that you execute using SXA, you're going to build your wireframes, right? You're going to enter your content. You're going to build your themes. And then using Creative Exchange, you will export the theme so that a front-end dev can work with that. Okay, so we are facing here one important truth that you're not supposed to do this way. Yeah, I mean, you can do this way, but SXA was built to work in a different way. Okay, so in SXA, the sequence, I would say the happy sequence will be, you define UX, right? Using SXA, you build the wireframes. When I say that you build the wireframes, you're not going to bother about, how your site is looking yet. Only that the things are in the correct places. So the header is in the header, the image in the left is in the left, and etc. So you build that using out-of-the-box components from SXA, and then you'll be able to, using SXA again, enter the content. And again, using SXA, you're going to export using Creative Exchange, and basically get your CSS and JavaScript files in a zip file, so you can send to the agency, the front end agency. That way, the front end agency can work disconnected with Sitecore, and that's the whole idea between this. Right? So this is a sequence that is good. You create a UX, number one. Number two, you will build the wireframes and add the content. Number three, you're going to export using Creative Exchange, export the zip files, and give that to the front end guy or the agency. The front end agency will do all the changes in that zip file, will zip back and send back to you, so you can import back to Creative Exchange using Creative Exchange and have that on Sitecore. Okay, so you do that loop several times until you're approved and you have the final pages. This is perfect. However, what if you have something different? Applying to SXA, this is not good. So what we have, our experiment context is this, okay? We are creating the UX design and the wireframes and the content during the creative phase, okay, outside of Sitecore, disconnected from Sitecore. And then we have all the index, all the HTML files there for you to use. You can double click, it will open in a browser. But okay, how do we implement that? We are here trying to, in this simulation, to ask the front end agency to create the HTML so we can import to Sitecore. No, this is not going to work, okay? And this is exactly what my experiment is trying to do. So okay, so the happy path doesn't work. What are we going to do next? Before that, I would like to tell you there are also some extra limitations. Okay, this comes from the official SXA documentation. What front ends can do with the Creative Exchange package and what they cannot. So front ends can add and modify images and files within the media library. He can add classes to nodes that has this comment, add your class here, and change images in the rendering, okay? But other than that, there are a lot of things front ends cannot do. Front ends cannot change anything in the HTML structure, no matter if they want, and they usually want. Delete existing CSS classes, this is not allowed. No. Update text content, again, this is not going to happen. Change base theme folders, no. Okay, so these will not be imported back to the system and can damage your site. This is in the official documentation. This is not myself telling you. Okay, so we got an inescapable conclusion. SXA was not designed to adapt to a predefined markup. Okay, front ends should make SXA pages look good at the CSS level, meaning that using Creative Exchange, front ends should be changing CSS JavaScript files to make the page looks good. Means that, you're not supposed to do this way, right? So we, of course, we consider aborting the experiment. What else we can do? Because this is not supposed to doing this way. What can we do? I will say reasons that we choose to continue. Our project does not have budget to a front-end dev, okay? Doing the right way, because we already have that HTML. Our project has a strong site core team, which is myself. And the experiment is planned doable with site core, right? Out of the box site core, vanilla site core. Thus, it would be a good try to do that, as I say, why not? Having a predefined markup, it's pretty common scenario, which will potentially make this an interesting experiment. That's why we choose to continue. And I'd like to bring a few scenarios where this flow would apply, okay? I hear people complaining about not being able to do this because it's a very common thing to have a front-end agency hired to implement the HTML static and give you that together for you, and the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Or maybe sometimes you have a legacy system being replatformed and the markup should be respected, Or maybe you have a layout template purchased from a commercial catalog. Or maybe you are using a free template. Why not? Why not? I know Sitecore is expensive, but you can still use a free layout, for instance, in a non-profit organization. So cases like that brings the idea, why not? Let's continue. Okay, so let's just give a heads up here. Being this time limited experiment, not all architecture solutions are, appropriate to real life scenarios. And I know some decisions are debatable, so I'm really willing to debate. If you want, this is my email, my Twitter, and let me know so we can keep this ball running, man. Or ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so here are the artifacts that we produced during this experiment. We got a Visual Studio solution with all the solution that we put together. It's available for you at any time in this URL. This is not an SXA solution. I would say, sorry, not a Helix solution. We are using just, as you can see, it's a very straightforward solution with only one project, and everything is in the same project, only one TDS project. Again, you're not supposed to do this way, right? You're supposed to do this correct. But this is just experiment. I like this excuse. And also we are producing a series of articles to be released. This is a work in progress. Lots of things are running, so not time yet, but these will be there as soon as possible. And also this presentation. Those are the artifacts produced by this experiment. And I would like to put in advance this conclusion. SXA is amazingly flexible. We ended up being able to do that, not without a few pains that I'm bringing you. Fortunately, you will not have to do that all alone because you're watching this presentation. Okay, so let's go to the Nuptial theme. It's a bootstrap theme. It is, as you can see, it's responsive. It works fine in different devices. And it has, it's not big deal. It has a CSS folder. It has a few folders for fonts, images, JS, and HTML files. Nothing fancy. It's really a normal template. It has, CSS files. It has JavaScript files. And of course, it has their images, right? And here I'm bringing you the base markup of this whole template. As you can see here, there are some things that will be problematic if you adopt that altogether in SXA. We got some, page header, as you can see here. This is not problematic at all. I'll tell later what is the problem. But okay, we have a page header here. We have internal components, internal markup. We have a JavaScript references in the end. Nothing fancy so far. But we have these divs outside, which is something that out of the box, SXA is not supporting, okay? Also, the markup of components, as you can see, it is pretty particular or peculiar. For instance, we have these custom properties in the markup as data section here, this data stellar background. These are all custom things that non-components in non-SXA out-of-the-box components will be able to make it. Even though this markup is quite simple, all the SXA out-of-the-box components cannot do it. Okay. All right. So I would like to go and start a first milestone. The first milestone was, quite simple. Just actually the debut work of the project. We're doing some installation, doing some setup, some creating tenant and adapt the theme to Nuptial Bootstrap, do the partial design for header, navigation, footer, and everything. We'll implement the markup and references from the index HTML file, and basic structure for headers, CSS, JavaScript, so every other pages can reuse it. Okay. Like I said, everything else is handled as static HTML. So the page is not fully dynamic, right? All right. So here comes the installation. I will actually, guys, there are some technical parts here that I'm not going to spend much time on it. Okay, I'll just go through everything, and if you have doubts, let me know. I'm watching here the chat window. Welcome, Edipo. Okay, so the first milestone, we did the ordinary installation of Sitecore 9 update 1. I know we are in update 2, but at the time of the experiment, we're not. We saw the SPE, PowerShell extensions, SXA itself, we publish, we index, we build index, normal installation. Some particular things we had to do is to disable concatenation and minification, because we're in development, so it's normal in SXA. You should do that if you are in development, right? Okay. We started here doing the grid system because we are incapable to use the grid system, out-of-the-box grid system that Bootstrap SXA brings you. So we need to create a grid system. This is one of the good things of SXA. It has that flexibility to create things like this grid system, because we have as you can see in the right here, you see the SXA's Bootstrap markup, which is quite different from what we have. So this is why we created a grid system based in Bootstrap. Of course, we will, use the existing Bootstrap grid system and copy that and, basically duplicate that so we can create our grid system. Rename that and modified this property grid body view path, so we point to our new CS HTML file, right? Guys, I'm sorry. Before I continue here. I will be uploading this presentation to our YouTube channel, and everybody will be able to download it, so you can have access to all this. Okay. And then at the grid setup, we pointed the grid definition to our new grid system. This is how we got a new grid system, so we can create now our tenant and the site itself. We're doing this now. Created that. As you can see, we are creating a new theme, because we not only will have a new grid system, but also a new theme for our website. And then we select our grid system. Next, we did some adjustments in the theme. We uploaded the CSS files. We uploaded the JavaScript files to Sitecore SXA. We modify a little bit the theme inheritance. So we got rid of things we don't need. And that's one important thing. Fonts are managed as external CDN references. And this is something that normally you can upload to SXA easily, but we are managing this as a CDN, and then we publish. Okay, I made some highlights on the font issue, and the font itself, because we found some issues. So originally our layout has fonts as CDN references, as you see. And SXA, in SXA, you cannot do that in the theme itself, because you need to upload the theme, the fonts itself to the theme, so you can use it. Okay, some here the alternatives that we got when dealing with fonts. We can keep them in CDN, but doing that correctly, of course. I am adding these references to the CDN to my layout, which is not good. Okay, so you should do that correctly. You can add fonts as files in the theme. You can upload them, but that's something you got to keep your attention to, because in this example, for instance, as you can see, we have font files with the same name, iCommon, and a different extension, .ttf or .svg or the WOFF. When you upload that to SXA, they will be renamed. I'm sorry, the extensions will be excluded, will be removed, and then we will end up with 4 files with the same name, right? iCommon for 4 iCommons, because Sitecore removes the extension. So that's why we had to rename before uploading. If you choose to do that, don't forget this particularity, because this will break SXA's theming. And also, you should open a CSS file from iCommon, because we got some references to the old files, and since we renamed that, we got to change these references. Okay, we created a new layout, but why? I would like to say you should never do that. Okay, I did that because I was doing an experiment, but in a real life situation, you are not doing this. You are using the out of the box markup. But the reason we did that is because our markup has a few external CDN references, like I'm saying. Our SXA theme references requires all assets to be stored as files. And then there are some complexities to download these files from the CDNs. For instance, sometimes they reference another external file, so you have to make sure that you download everything. So we have some specific metadata, as well as meta tags in the markup of our header. And again, this is just experiment. Okay, but hold on. I am really using that excuse too often. So let me bring you what you should actually do, okay? So never never change the layout. So always use the original SXA MVC layout, because this is capable of, at least for this experiment, I I look at all the whole of the HTML, and SXA's MVC layout is capable for doing that. You should use that, and you have in the markup, you have a placeholder called head that you can use to inject your stuff as components, of course. So do that. Also, you have this great extension from Michael Westco SXA extension, which is enabling you to reference inside an SXA theme an external reference, which is really a good fit for this. All right, so we set up our new layout. We created a view. We added the layout itself pointing to our view. We updated the template to use our new layout because we did that wrong. It's, again, just an experiment. We did selected the Nuptial theme as a default theme for our website. Right? Okay. Next, we like I mentioned before, SXA's out-of-the-box components, they always inject some markup. And here in this experiment, we got an important requirement, which is don't touch the markups. Okay, the markups should be respected. So we cannot use out-of-the-box SXA components because it, again, will inject some markup. So that's why we created some naked versions of SXA's components, okay? We created a naked version of the plain HTML component, but this time not injecting any markup. And also we created a new version of the naked splitter, which allows you to split a placeholder in the middle. But this time we did one that does not inject any markup. Okay. All right, we got all this. I would like to tell you, it's not a good practice to keep on, duplicating components in SXA and doing all that, because it can get really out of your control if you start duplicating components this way. I would like to bring you that there are other options to do that. For instance, in this blog post from Himadri, my coworker, we are bringing you a solution so you can have custom site-specific theming for your views. So you can use using the same component, having a view in one website and another view in a different website. Okay, thanks Himadri for that. Really love this. Everybody use that in the company. I will bring a new announcement in the end of this presentation, where I would like to catch up to this blog from Himadri to tell you how visionary he was in 2017 when he put that together. Okay, but continuing. Here's a footer that's part of the Milestone 1 yet. It's a partial design. Like you do usually in SXA, you create a partial design. And then we added the two HTML blocks using the naked components, one for the top, the other one for the footer block. We're adding all that. We created a page design and named that homepage design. So we can map that to our template, to our page itself. Okay. And then the header partial design, again, I'll not spend much time here. We're just, adding some new components using the naked components. So we can do this, okay? And that's an important thing in SXA, guys. It's not just in this experiment. If you're working a partial design, and you want to have a placeholder in your partial design that can be used by the the content editors outside of the partial design, what you have to do is to leave an empty placeholder like I'm doing here, so you can use that in experience editor outside of the partial design. If you don't do that, then that placeholder will not be reachable outside. Okay. And then the static components. So here we're just using the naked plain HTML to bring this content as components inside each of the placeholders that we got. Right. In the end of the first milestone, we got a layout issue. I noticed that by investigating that, I noticed that there was something in the SXA that was injecting an overlay class. This background you see here, that was being injected by SXA. I'm sorry, by my template, and was conflicting that with the SXA. So we disabled the CSS theme from SXA by setting that as unpublishable. So the CSS file, overlay CSS file, is not injected anymore, and our layout is respected. Okay, quick one, milestone 2. It's the second internal page. We'll do that all very similar to how we did in the first one. It's a home, a hero banner, a footer, there's a menu, and a form. The only extra is that everything will be static. Okay, and we started by creating a new page, and again, changing the layout. I would like to tell you again, don't do this. Anyhow, we created our page and added all the partial designs to it so it can look like our stuff. And we added a hero banner and etc. Okay, so milestone 3 is dynamic components. So we're getting out of these plain HTML text components and now creating some dynamic components. Okay, right. So when we are going to create components in SXA, of course, we look at the documentation. And you see again, since we got this markup to respect because of our experiment, if you look at the documentation, they are telling you that you must use this HTML SXA component call in your view. So you have something like this. This is how your view should look like. By looking at it, you can see that Sitecore is telling you should, if using SXA, you should have a predefined markup route there, right? Especially the SXA component stuff, but also the internal div is something we cannot afford. So, right, if you don't do this, then you will not be able to use Creative Exchange. So in our mission here, we need to respect this markup. So I needed to do this. Because of that, we're losing Creative Exchange for this component. Right? So here's the first component. It's a banner. It has a title, subtitle. It has a within date that the user can choose to hide. And the within date is a global date value. It's a global, okay? No, it's not just for this component, but for the whole website. And the same component will be in 2 different pages, so it should have different look and feel or different content on each. Here's again a weird HTML markup. Okay, so I will really be fast on these guys. I will not spend much telling you this. You can download the presentation later and see that in details if you want. We created a template for the within date. We call this Nuptial settings. We created a model so we can have some, using Sitecore Rock, some code generation. We created our settings there in the content tree. And we created a data source template for the hero banner. We created model, etc., implemented that. This is standard component creation. Not go deep on this. Of course, we register dependencies because we're using dependency injection, so we need to do that. Replace the HTML block that was a static HTML component by our component. Okay, second component was this couple component, which is, you have a Groom bride information with the particularity that this information need to be managed globally. The Groom and bride guys, the pictures, the names of them, they're not in the component data source itself, but it is global because multiple components will be using that. So we have here a component title, again, within date, city, country, all that is content, and also some fancy HTML again. Right, so we did the implementation of that. We created a template again for the within date settings with all that fields, groom and bride information. We updated the code generation and created the template and etc. Again, this is just normal implementation of a component, so won't hold you much on this. Once we replace the HTML block, we noticed that we got to change a little bit the style CSS file, the one that comes from the experiment, from the CSS bootstrap template. We added an import because, again, SXA was injecting something that was conflicting with that. And the footer. The footer is, simple. Has a title. It has some social media links and has a copyright in the bottom, and again, some fancy HTML. Right? Okay, so we created the data source template and a model. I'm sorry, some code generation. We created the rendering again and replaced that. We can go with details on this. Don't worry. And after that, we got a problem because the icons were not looking as it should. This is because we are now in a dynamic component, a real component, not a HTML block. And we noticed that we were using a general link. As you can see here, all the fields were general link. And general link demands, actually, our CSS demands that your link has something inside. And I added a space, as you can see here, so it look at well again. And here's the third and last component, Groom and bride. It has a title. Again, it has Groom and bride information. Like I told you before, this info is global and not in the data source and not fancy HTML. Right, we use the data source template. We created an existing data source template that we created for the couple component. We created a rendering for that. We created another component, but using the same controller as the other component, just a different view, as you can see here, and replace the block. Cool. When we did that, we got our experiment done. That's all was the boring part. Now that we got our thing working, here are the experiment outputs. Okay, we got our components. They are all experience editor friendly. You can edit that using what you see, what you get, experience editor normal. The website is fully SXA compatible, but there are some lacking areas. Okay, we lost the SXA toolbar and the drag and drop functionalities at some part of this experiment. This is gone. I haven't had time to get into the reasons of that. And of course, the creative exchange feature is compromised, doesn't work fully. Okay, the third output I would like to bring you is that you should not change the SXA layout. Fourth one is that theming can be tricky, especially if you have CDN references, if you have external references inside CSS, if you have paths to assets inside the CSS that might need adjustment. Some CSS and JavaScript can be overridden by the SXA theme inheritance, like we saw. We got custom components or custom views for existing components may be necessary to respect exact markup. So if you have this requirement that you need to respect a certain markup, you should avoid, you should be forced to create dynamic components, so custom components for you, because the out of the box won't do it. Right? Some conclusions I would like to bring from this experiment. First one is that SXA is amazingly flexible. Okay, we ended up doing that. It has a custom grid system that is only allowed because SXA allows you to do that. We got some site-based theming that is there because of SXA. We got the flexibility of the components, so you can create different versions of components and inject different views into an existing components. So that's all good. Okay, and the second conclusion is that having a predefined, pre-existing markup in SXA is possible, but it can be tricky. It also might be as costly as traditional site core development, because you'll be forced to be creating some custom components all the time, and you might be increasing your maintenance complexity. Okay, I got a very special announcement from Adam, the guy that created SXA. The last time I presented this was on Sitecore Jordan. Was a great experience, and then Adam was looking into that, and let us everybody knows that in the next SXA version, the next release, he told me today that the release is being tested now, and it's working. You will have finally the theming, site-specific theming for views, okay? Meaning that you'll be able to use the same component in a different website with a different view. And this is so important because SXA is getting, out of the box, something that my coworker and friend Himadri built 2 years ago. Okay, so this is a very important information for the community. Looks like the next experiments like this will be much easier. Okay. All right, guys. That's all I got. I would like to know if anyone has any questions. This is the chance I have to read your comments in YouTube. Amitabh, my email is that rodrigo@peplau.com. Oh no, .br in the end, .br. Okay, peplau.com.br. BR from Brazil. Edipo, you're saying this is good for front end devs, but not for, oh no, not good for front end devs, but good for backends. Actually, it's the opposite. SXA was built to, please the front end devs and the marketing team, while the backend guys will be, a bit, but behind, I would say, because the whole idea in SXA is that you can build pages without even opening Visual Studio. but I am trying to break this in this experiment. Thanks, Diego, for the props. SXA without commerce have a functionality clone. Edipo, I'm not sure if you're talking about cloning items or what exactly. Let me know if you can elaborate that in the chat window. Edipo, my experiment were run in July. Okay, we're in the time that we are in Sitecore 9 update 1. Oh yeah, yeah. Edipo is saying that he was referring to the export HTML creative exchange. It's good. It's not good for front end devs. They don't like to use that. Exactly. They don't like that. Actually, that part of SXA, in my opinion, was built to allow that flow that I showed in the beginning, where you have that flow that you can use SXA and Sitecore to build your wireframes and then send that to the front end devs. But indeed, man, there are lots of limitations, like I said in the beginning of this presentation, and that's why front ends don't like that. Because of that, I think this experience shows very well how is the normal flow of most of the agencies, where you have the HTML done and then you start the implementation. So that's the whole idea in this experiment.